I think eventually there's going to be a monitor there. All I know is all of my legs are not fitting.
Yeah, mine aren't either.
They're supposed to be big TVs.
You barely sit around.
I was just saying, this is so perfect.
No, this is low. Oh, I know. I can.
Well, I hit this.
That'll be a little bit. This is.
I'm like,
Yeah, that's
sure,
right.
thank you. I keep hitting that.
Actually, yeah, this does.
You're fine. You're fine.
Put this behind this. I like that. Okay. We'll be ready to go.
Yes, jet lag. I feel jet lag. We couldn't do that. No.
All right, I show that it's 4:30. We'll go ahead and call to order the City of Bella Vista Planning Commission meeting. I would remind the commissioners we don't have audio visual tonight, so speak up and speak clearly, please. If you can go ahead and call the roll, please.
Portillo,
Here.
Sedberry,
Here.
Pleasant,
Here.
Dool,
Here.
Barner,
Here.
Lloyd,
Here.
Ellis.
Here. All right, we do have a quorum. Next up, we have our regular meeting minutes from February 13th.
I make a motion to be approved as submitted.
Got a motion from Farner.
Second.
Got a second from Portillo. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, meeting minutes are approved. All right, this is the time of our night where we have our public input session. This will be an opportunity for the public to address the Planning Commission. We do have several public hearings also tonight on the variances and waivers, so we will give the public a chance then. But if there is anybody that would like to address the commission for a non-published item or for one of the large scale, this will be your only opportunity tonight. All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public input session. We have nothing under unfinished business, new business. We have waiver 2023-47840, waiver associated with large-scale 46350 regarding driveway slope, cut setbacks, pedestrian accommodations, and detention. Ms. Workman.
Thank you. I apologize. So on page 7 of your packet on your iPad, you will see the Planning Commission staff report. And within this staff report, I have taken a look at waiver 47840, large scale 46350, and zoning variance 47158. All of these have to do with the large scale development known as Lisa Reeves Law Office that is located north of the intersection of Oldham and Bella Vista Way. This is a 3,200 square foot proposed building on a 0.92 acre C4 lot. Nothing has changed in the staff report since the work session. The applicant is here tonight though, should you have any questions after my staff report. Planning staff is recommending denial of the large scale zoning variance and waiver application due to the substantial changes that will be required due to the geotech analysis limiting the cut to 9 feet, RDOT's driveway grade requirements, the fire marshal driveway grade requirements, and the proposed project changing between the 3rd and 4th revision to the point where city staff cannot do it without an additional outside technical review. So contained below are going to be all of the city staff comments, which are outstanding and have been answered, a number of correspondence between RDOT discussing the location and grade of the driveway. And then here we have the elevations of the building, and then the plan set below, which still contain the original planning staff comments from the last meeting. And that is all planning has prepared for this staff report. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for staff?
Is the application for this large-scale development complete?
It is not. So there are a number of comments that have to do with 107.225, which is our section that essentially is all of the things that an applicant has to show us when they submit to us, things like locations of fire hydrants, landscaping. We're still missing a number of those items from the 1st through the 3rd submission.
Okay.
And a denial tonight does not necessarily mean that they can't come back in the future when everything is in order.
For everything except for the zoning variance. The zoning variance cannot be resubmitted.
Gotcha.
I have a question. Are you talking
That's out
about
of order.
possible?
That's our board meeting.
Sorry.
Any other questions for staff? All right, we do have the applicant present. If you'd like to go ahead and come up to the podium. Sure.
Jason Ingles with Expedient Civil Engineering. We missed the work session. I had a little bit of email trouble, and I didn't get the email to be here for the work session. We have since gotten a geotechnical report, and we just received that last week. We're looking at realigning the drive to the south instead of coming out on the Bella Vista Way, realigning it so it comes on to Dr. Combs, the dental office to the south. I think it'll be a better design. I guess I have a question for staff, and that would be, if the zoning request is denied, if we came back with a different request, not the exact request, do we have to wait the 1 year to come back with that?
You do not.
No.
So if we came back, so right now it asks for 15, if we came back to 14 or a different number, then we would be able to come back and do that. So I have no problem with that. I apologize for this project. It's kind of a difficult site. Convincing the owner that they needed to do a geotechnical study was took a little bit of arm tugging to try to get that done. We finally had that geotechnical study. We've convinced them that the driveway out onto Bella Vista Way is not in their best interest, that we should come to Dr. Combs. The question right now is they're trying to coordinate with that property owner to make that happen. So once we get that ironed out, we'll be bringing the plan set back to staff for another review, and hopefully we'll have it complete at the time of submission. Answer the questions you had.
So, anybody have any questions for the applicant at this point?
So are you tabling this, or are you suggesting not approving this now?
Well, go
I
ahead.
think we got a better question for the city attorney. I think we're to the point where the commission has to take action tonight. I think we've tabled this long enough.
Well, the tabling is up to the commission to do.
Right.
The time issues have been waived by the applicant.
Yeah.
But the commission has absolutely every right to go ahead and consider this and either vote it up or vote it down as it seems
No.
appropriate.
I think, does the applicant have the option to withdraw everything he's applied for?
He can.
And then
He
figure
could.
it out?
He could.
Is there a stipulation like before deliberation or anything?
You're gonna have
No.
to speak up, Taylor. I'm sorry. What were we saying?
I was asking for clarification if the withdrawal had to be before deliberation or anything.
No, just before a final decision.
Jason?
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Before a final decision.
Okay. Before we take the final decision, he can choose to withdraw it. So,
I think that's what I was asking.
yeah.
And maybe that's, thank you, David. Maybe that's the option we want to take, is just we withdraw it and then reapply. I think that would be the better.
You tell us.
I think that's the better solution.
So you want to withdraw both of these?
Three.
Three of them?
All three of them.
Waiver, variance, and large scale.
Okay.
All right, so we have items A, B, and C has been requested to be withdrawn by the applicant. Do we need to take action on that, or is it just gone?
It's gone.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. We will see
Thank
you
you.
at a later date.
Thank you.
To clarify for everybody in the office, in the audience, basically what has happened is the Lisa Law Office has been withdrawn from city consideration. We will see it again at some point in the future, possibly, not sure when.
Maybe you can put the mic on, please, so we can all hear what's being said, or is it not there?
No, I'm sorry, tonight, we don't have any audio visual in the room, so this is all we've got. and
Audio,
That's not even working to be
No, that's
quite
what I was wondering if it was.
No. So, all
Maybe
right,
speak a little
we will
louder.
speak, I will speak as loud as I can.
Okay, good. Same as I do, yes. If you speak louder, we all can hear.
Yes, I'll try to repeat the questions and the comments for everybody.
Thank you.
You betcha. All right, next up, we have waiver 2023-47896, a waiver request to waive pedestrian accommodations, ponding requirements, curb and gutter for large scale 47063. Ms. Robertson.
Okay, staff doesn't have much to add from the work session. However, staff will note that the waiver letter has been addressed or edited to address a fourth item, which is the channel slope. So they're actually seeking a waiver on the pedestrian accommodations along 279, the channel slope and drainage pond slope requirements, as well as curb and gutter requirements. So there's 4 items they're asking to be waived within that waiver letter. Other than that, staff is recommending approval so long as they meet several requirements, those being that the planning commission approves the waiver request and that they meet all private requirements, which will include an easement release. They are willing to put concrete in that entire 15-foot or 7.5 on each side easement, because they will need private release. Provide proof of recording of the access agreement for the existing access. They will need to bring that access into compliance with code. That means a 30-foot radius, 24 feet wide at least. And similar items, it will be a turn right turn only. They will be placing a sign and striping on there to designate that as a right turn only, since it's going on to 279. They will need to achieve RDOT approval, and then of course, final approvals with utilities before getting a building permit or a GEC with us. But that's the only update I have on this, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for staff?
Do I understand there are still a number of things that have to be done to make this application complete?
No. So staff is recommending approval for things that need done after LSD. So that's pretty typical. They have to get an easement release before the building permit. These are all just standard after LSD items. This application is complete now that the waiver letter has been addressed.
Do waivers of public improvements, do those go to city council?
No.
No. All right, any other questions for staff. The applicant present, would you like to add anything to the staff report?
I do not.
All right, do we have any questions for the applicant? I think, I mean, just in general, I understand the large scale in itself stands, as at face value, and I've heard the argument before that sidewalks to nowhere, but I also think at some point we've got to start putting sidewalks in the city of Bella Vista, because there just aren't any. So I think what we'll do is take a motion on each individual waiver tonight, and then we'll proceed to the large scale. So with that, looking at the waiver letter, the first up is a waiver on the pedestrian accommodations along 279. Is that correct, Taylor?
Yes, that's the first section of code.
All right, so we have Article 4, Section 107-250 for pedestrian accommodations. We have a waiver request on that.
Make a motion to approve the pedestrian accommodations waiver.
We got a motion from Sedberry.
Second.
We got a second from Dool. You call the roll, please.
Portillo,
Yes.
Varner,
No.
Lloyd,
No.
Dool. No. Sedberry,
No.
Plesson,
No.
Ellis.
No. All right, next up, we have Article 4, Section 107-250, improvements and standards for streets, curbs, and gutters. And where this is a request to not install curbs and gutters for all the streets unless otherwise specified.
Motion to approve improvements, streets, curbs, and gutters waiver.
Got a motion from Sedberry.
Second.
Got a second from Farner.
Plesson,
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, no, Clesson was called first.
I'm sorry, what?
We're calling the roll.
Varner,
Yeah.
Something's happened.
Yeah, what's going on?
I thought there was a discussion time before a vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead. I apologize. I thought we already discussed all the waivers, so I'm just going down to each one.
No, this is kind of an extension of an existing project that has no curbs and gutters, is that correct?
That's my understanding.
And we determined that the water flow is not going to be adversely affected if we approve the waiver for curbs and gutters.
Our engineer found these waiver requests sufficient. He found these waiver requests minimal. Our engineer had no concern with them.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that. We do have a motion by Sedberry and a second by Farner. We can start over with the roll call, please.
Varner,
Yes.
Plesson,
Yes.
Sedberry,
No.
Dool, Portillo,
Yes.
Lloyd,
Yes?
Ellis.
No. All right, next up, we have a waiver request from the Drainage Manual, Chapter 5, Section 6.4. The geometry of storage facilities and pond bottom slopes must be a minimum of 1% to ensure drainage. Any conversation or discussion? Questions? All right, seeing none, we'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the waiver.
We got a motion to approve from Farner,
Second.
second from Sedberry.
Dool. No. Sedberry,
Yes.
Portillo,
Yes.
Plesson,
Yes.
Lloyd,
Yes.
Varner,
Yes.
Ellis.
No. All right, last up, we have a waiver request from Drainage Manual, Chapter 3, Section 3.11.3, design slopes on a grass line channel. Any discussion or conversation?
And the engineer found that okay also?
Okay. Any other questions? Take a motion.
Motion approves waiver of design slopes.
We got a motion from Sedberry,
Second.
second from Farner. Call the roll, please.
Sedberry,
Yes.
Dool. Yes. Portillo,
Yes.
Lloyd,
Yes?
Varner,
Yes.
Plesson,
Yes.
Ellis.
Yes. All right, after that, we do have the large scale itself. Any further discussions, questions, or comments? Yes, ma'am.
We don't have to have a public
large, not large, only on variances and rezonings.
Thank you.
And if not, we'll entertain a motion with staff recommendations and comments.
I make a motion, we approve with staff recommendations and requirements.
We have a motion from Farner,
Second.
second from Dool, if you call roll, please.
Farner,
Yes.
Sudbury,
Yes.
Plesson,
Yes.
Dool. Yes. Portillo,
Yes.
Lloyd,
No. Yes, sorry.
and Ellis.
Yes, your large scale is approved. You'll get with staff, they can help you out with the next steps. Thank you. All right. Well, I'm flying blind. That's all right, I'll catch up eventually. All right, but next up, we have our zoning variance. A zoning variance request for the maximum height in the I-1 zone in the landscape perimeter for a large-scale 47527, I think, which is, this is the concrete plant. Is that correct, Taylor?
Yeah, this is the concrete plant redevelopment request at 350 Pinion Drive.
Will you give us the page number, Taylor?
Yeah, I'm scrolling through this large document.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to.
Page 74 is where we're headed. If you're scrolling, it should come up on the right side.
It comes up on the left side at the top, when you're scrolling.
Yeah.
For me, it's the right side.
Oh.
I will note that if we're all at 74 or 75?
Yes, ma'am. Please
Okay.
proceed.
So there is a zoning variance request attached with this large scale, so it will require a public hearing tonight. However, staff is recommending tabling that after the public hearing. There has been an update to this project since the work sessions now, that being that we've discovered that a septic system that's still being used is within an area possibly almost ready to recommend approval. However, upon discovery that the septic, we're still trying to hunt down exactly where it's at. I believe the applicant was there today trying to identify where it is. There's a septic permit on file, so we've really been looking. But we don't want to recommend approval until we verify where that septic is, because it is still being used. There's not sewer in there, and of course adequate utilities is a very important part of the large scale requirement. So other than that, I will note also the floodplain or certified floodplain manager did add a comment that's on there on page 1. That'll be a requirement that they need to meet for the floodplain permit way down the road if you guys do approve this. However, this is the first time that they're coming to you, so that's why staff is recommending tabling and the discovery of this septic system being on Friday, so the time of this report. The applicant's here to answer more questions, and I believe she just got back from her field visit there, so happy to take any questions before she comes up.
Yeah, real quick question for you. So are you recommending us table the variance and the large scale, or just the large scale?
I would recommend both so they can be considered together, however you guys obviously want to do it, but I'm recommending tabling both.
Okay. Because the variance is just dealing with the height of the structure, which,
Yeah.
You can consider, they're separate.
Yeah.
Plus, I would always recommend you go ahead and have your public hearing because the notice went out for today.
absolutely. And that's the other thing, is the public's here to hear about that variance request. And I don't think there's anything precluding us from taking action on that that would violate us figuring out the septic later on, would it?
No, you'd be fine.
Do you want me to give information about the zoning variance?
Yeah, I would like for you to go ahead and give that since we're going to hold the public hearing on that.
Okay, perfect. The applicant is seeking a zoning variance on the following items, which would be the height, which we've already talked about. The I-1 limits all structures within the zone to be maxed out at 45 feet tall. I believe the hopper is about 54, 55 feet. And they're also requesting a variance on the green space requirements. I-1 is required to have a 15% green space. It is sitting around 5% right now, currently as is, but they are trying to up that to 12%. However, they're still not able to reach the 15% requirement due to the hardships they've mentioned in their letter to you guys. And then they are also requesting a variance on the perimeter landscape requirements on the sides. They would like to keep using the block wall that's already there. And of course, for the hardship reasons they mentioned in their letter. And I've deferred to them for any more explanation on their hardship reasoning. But those are the three things that this public hearing is about. It's going to be the height for the 54-foot tall hopper,
And the landscape perimeter requirements, they want to put a block wall instead, and then third being a green space. It's currently 5%, and the applicant is stating they can only get it up to 12%, 3% short of that 15% requirement.
Do we have to take each variance request one by one, sir?
Yes.
Fair enough. Public hearing for each one?
Well, were these not all on one application?
Yes, they were.
We can do one
It's all
public
done.
hearing.
You can
but
do
we
one
gotta vote
public
on
hearing.
each one independently. Okay. All right, any other questions for staff on the zoning variance?
Oh, Nick.
Oh, we got 3 going.
Oh, sorry.
Dual first. I heard you first.
Okay, hopefully mine's quick. Okay, I want to make sure I understand their hardship letter. The variance for the hopper height, it's not, so they currently have the same height, they're replacing it with the exact same height, is that correct?
I believe that's my understanding, yes.
But we have a pre-existing requirement that it'd be only 45 feet.
Yes, and they're completely replacing it, so it needs brought up to code.
Okay,
Right now, it's existing as a legal nonconformity,
right.
but since they're replacing it and redeveloping it, it's going to be brought up 45 feet.
Okay, understood, thank
And
you.
it's my understanding that the reason for the increase is that dust collector on top. Is that right?
I thought it was the same, but
Maybe a question
she's
for
here
the
for
applicant.
questions like that. I thought it was the same height, but it is going to be an improvement to collect dust better and keep those nuisances on site. That's why they're wanting to replace it.
Any other questions for staff?
No, she had no question.
Okay.
No, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
If they're talking about this landscaping part of it, if there's a problem with the septic, is that going to affect that? Or if they can't do septic, then they would have to go hard line?
There is no sewer in that area, so they're going to have to stay septic. That's what they are figuring out right now that they've discovered where it's at, about. Again, applicant's here to I defer to her on more because she just did a field visit out there. But the green space requirements shouldn't be affected. In fact,
If they have to put a larger septic or a new septic, is that going to affect that landscaping?
I don't believe
That'd
so.
be a good question for the applicant.
Yeah.
I'm full of them tonight.
That's fine. We're going to get the applicant up here also. Questions for staff on the report? Is the applicant present?
Yes, she is.
If you would go ahead and come on up to the microphone for us and speak very loudly. We are limited, and I know that there are people in the
I've been
audience wanting to
struggling.
listen to you.
I've been trying to listen to your questions, and the older I get, the more you add a little background noise, and
Yeah.
it just disappears.
And then the guy.
It's like nap time, right? Oh, goodness. Okay, so I've been out. Taylor called me Friday afternoon. I've kind of been trying to do a little research on what was what is, and when it came in, and whatnot. This thing's been operating, Commissioner Gill, for about 30 years in that location. So what he's trying to do is improve the situation. It's a big dusty. It was pretty muddy today. I had to change out of my boots because I didn't want to swell the new carpet. It's very fancy now. But what we did, we went out and measured the top of the box for the sewer tank, and it's located. Are you guys looking at the site plan? It's located at about where that number 2 is in the accessible stall area. Does that make sense? The tank is 8 by 6, 5 feet deep.
Mm-hmm.
And the lateral lines now extend out to the west, make sure I'm going the right direction. And I met with the owner today. It's first couple of conversations we had about this coming up. And what he's wanting to do, and I don't know, and I apologize for this not being in the correct, I can't even talk anymore today. I think I've got concrete dust in my throat, quite honestly. But what he was wanting to do, and to see if you were agreeable to leave it as is now, and just not pave over, because I looked at the ordinance, and it's obvious we shouldn't pave solid over it. Owner told me he had recently had Maze Plumbing out, and they had done a perk test, so it's functioning. It functions as it is. All they had is one stool, one sink, and not high use at all. much less than just a house. But what he wanted me to see is if we could leave it basically as is in that area and not pave that area. It would remain as gravels, which to me would be closest we could come, but it's still somewhat of a grandfathering in as is. It's been there so long, so I don't know how that works. I don't know. And then I don't know because I know if he leaves it gravel, leaves it as is, he can still use it for maneuvering and queuing and that sort of thing. But he would take the walls that we currently have shown and take those bins, move them to the back side of the property, and we would go with option number 1 for that concrete plant equipment to kind of stay right where it is pretty much, right in the center of the property. So I'm not quite sure if that would be a variance from solid surfacing or what that might add to our process we need to do to make it fit. Does anybody?
I don't want to speak for staff, but
Okay.
I'm going to be willing to bet before you can get your large scale approved, you're going to have to get whatever septic stuff you're doing approved by the Department of Health. And get it
Well,
active.
we were proposing to do nothing.
I think it
The
still.
do nothing option.
I think it still has to be permitted. It never was permitted, and it's going to have to be permitted with the Department of Health. They're actually the ones that govern septic systems at the end of the day, correct? Not us.
I don't know. that
Our
it
city
wasn't
attorney's
permitted.
sitting there shaking his head that you're going to have to deal with.
Yeah,
County
but
Health Department.
again, I don't know that it wasn't permitted. I mean, it's 20, 30 years ago, the Department of Health's been in, they've been doing this for
I
a
had
while, so. Did you?
Yes,
But you
ma'am.
didn't.
It's on the plat.
Okay, so we're gonna have to find it? Is that the issue? Is that?
Yeah, we're gonna need to
Okay.
look at it. There are requirements. 19186 does not allow driveways or traversing over.
Right.
So whether that be gravel or concrete, that's where staff feels uncomfortable making a recommendation. Because there still may be maneuvering on top of it, which our code does not allow.
Yeah, there was an agreement made back in the 70s between Cooper and the health department on septic systems and what can be done and can't be done. And
Well, they've been doing it though. That's the problem. Because it's basically taken away a privilege and a right and a level of enjoyment of that property for 30 years. Not to use those words, but,
and it's still
it's,
required permit.
yeah, well, he can, I know, and he's upgrading the property too. He's trying to fix the situation, so.
Yeah.
I'm not at all being combative, but it's just that we've gone through this and we're like, oh, we gotta have a variance, so we come back. So now, I just need to know what we can do to get it to where he can do what he needs to do. And if that's coming from staff, then we need to table.
We're here for the variance.
Variances, yeah, we
And
can.
really, what you're asking are legitimate questions, but they need to be worked out with the staff, not in front of the planning commission meeting.
Right. Yeah, I just thought it was I thought it would end up as a variance, so I wanted to talk to him about it.
Yeah, but it's one we can't take up tonight because it's not
Okay.
been published or
Okay.
addressed or anything like that. The only thing we can take up tonight is your height one,
Okay.
the green space one, and the landscape perimeter one.
Did you guys have any questions for me about that? Those pieces? Right now, there are solid walls on either side of the property, so there's no landscaping there. He's adding landscape in the front.
Effectively, this is going to be about the same height as the original one. We're
Yes.
not really looking at,
Yes, and
we're
there's,
not like sticking something up way taller than what was there before. It's
No.
more or less,
it's pretty much the same, it's just got the dust collector on the top, which helps everybody,
right,
so.
okay. All right, any other questions for the applicant? All right, we'll go ahead and conduct a public hearing and then we'll go from there.
We'll see.
All right, at this time, we're going to go ahead and conduct a public hearing. What we'll be talking about during this public hearing will be the proposed height variance that they're asking for, the proposed green space variance reduction from 15% to 12%, and then the perimeter landscaping. So at this time, if there's anybody in the public that would like to address the planning commission, if you come up to the podium, state your name and address, and you will have 5 minutes to speak to the planning commission.
Is this only on the hopper that was?
This is on the hopper, yes,
Yes.
ma'am. So come on up to the microphone, give us your name and address,
Oh,
and you have
okay.
5 minutes. Yes,
My name
ma'am.
is Denise Rochette, Rochette. I live on Dalton. And my question, when you talk about heights on an yes, an I-1, will that now be for all I-1 zone areas or only this one in particular?
It would be just for this particular property only. It would not apply to anything else within the city.
Even though it has the same zoning of I-1?
That's correct. Is there anybody else that would like to address the commission concerning these variance requests? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the planning commission. Ultimately, I think it's up to us if we want to take action on these three variances tonight or not. I kind of feel like we should. The public's here, and we can take them one by one. So, and I think it would give the applicants some guidance on how to move forward with the rest of the large scale. That's up to you all. That's just my opinion.
Okay with that.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm okay.
Okay. I'm going to do my best to get these right then. I might need your help, Taylor, so bear with me.
Should have them under request on my main page of the staff report.
All right. Well, it just listed now.
Yeah.
Let me see here.
What page?
I think I've got this stuff. All right, we'll take up the first one. Will be on the request to exceed the height from 45 feet to 54 feet. Is that correct?
Letter
Is it a little, sorry.
58 feet. Thank you. So we have a variance request to increase the height limit from 45 feet to 58 feet. Any discussion?
I make a motion, we approve that waiver.
We got a motion from Farner.
Second.
Got a second from Klesson. If you call the roll, please.
Sedberry,
Yes.
Dool,
Yes.
Portillo,
Yes.
Lloyd,
Yes.
Farner,
Yes.
Klesson,
Yes.
Ellis.
Yes. All right, next up, we have a variance request to reduce the allowable green space from 15% to 12%. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a motion.
I make a motion, we approve the waiver.
Got a motion from Farner,
Second.
second from Sedberry. If you call the roll, please.
Sedberry,
Yes.
Dool,
Yes.
Portillo,
Yes.
Lloyd,
Yes.
Farner,
Yes.
Klesson,
Yes.
Ellis.
Yes. All right, finally, we have a variance request on the perimeter landscaping. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the variance for the perimeter landscape.
All right, got a motion from Sedberry,
Second.
got a second from Lloyd. Call the roll, please.
Sedberry,
Yes.
Dool,
Yes.
Portillo,
Yes.
Lloyd,
Yes.
Farner,
Yes.
Klesson,
Yes.
Ellis.
Yes. All right, all three of your variances are approved. As far as the large scale goes, if you could come back up to the podium, we'll need you to request to be tabled and waive your 60-day time frame, or we will be required to take action on the large scale tonight.
Is it 60 or 90?
It's 60 days in Bella Vista.
It's 90 for large scale.
Oh, is it 90 for large scale?
60.
All right, Taylor told me 90, so I didn't
Okay,
want to ask
I'm
for
sorry, I
60.
get confused. We've had a lot of
Okay,
tabling
all right.
lately.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got staff over here to keep me straight.
And it's, just to be clear, it's not a requirement that they waive the time, but it may give you more of an incentive to go ahead and agree to table it if they waive the time.
Yes.
Because you'll have meetings between now and 90 days.
Yes, we're pretty close, so it's.
Yeah, it feels like it, because we had a delay with the waiver, so I am requesting that you allow us to table this item, and also stating that we waive the 90-day requirement for action to be taken. I get that close?
We have a request from the applicant to table this. Can we get a motion, please?
I make a motion to table the item.
We got a motion from Klesson,
Second.
second from Portillo. Call the roll, please.
Farner,
Yes.
Dool,
Yes.
Lloyd,
Yes.
Portillo,
Yes.
Klesson,
Yes.
Sedberry,
Yes.
Ellis.
Yes. We'll see you next month. Good luck with.
Thank you all for your time, I appreciate it.
You bet. All right, next up, we have rezoning 2022-47387, request to rezone a subject property at 2271 Bella Vista Way from R1 to I1. Ms. Robertson.
I have no updates on this one. This is currently known as Golf Central. The applicant is here just like he has been, however the request is a little different, so C1. Neighborhood commercial, he's requesting I1 due to the current land use and historical land use of this property, being that hazardous material storage, maintenance, equipment storage, all of those items that you don't typically find in your neighborhood commercial items. So he is also using another maintenance facility is also currently zoned as I1. He stated that in his letter. And then staff is recommending that a more intense use go here other than R1 single family. It is in the most intense node on our comprehensive plan. However, our comprehensive plan does not address future land use for industrial uses. However, it is in the most intense node that we have on the future land use plan, so something more intense than R1 needs to go here. The applicant is aware that you may modify the request as is if you choose to do so for city council. And I believe he's here to answer any questions that you guys have for him.
Thank you, Taylor. Any questions for staff? Mr. Farner?
I think this may be more for Jason, the attorney, than staff. I have some concerns, and it was expressed in our work session, that if we rezone this and the POA later decided to sell the property, then we don't know what could go in there. Now, I understand the POA could virtually not sell it, but it's my understanding they can lease the property. So my question would be, is there any way we can approve this zoning change and put some restriction on it so they could not lease it without coming back to us?
No. You can't do that. I mean, if it goes from C1 to I1, then anything that would be allowed in I1 could happen there.
Okay.
We don't do, there's no conditional rezoning.
Okay.
I mean, there are conditional use permits, but this is not what's been requested. And I don't even know that this would be a conditional use in that zone. So that's the process which you're talking about, but that just doesn't apply here.
Is there any other zoning that would be compatible with what they're doing that would be be more restrictive than the I-1?
I'm glad you asked me that question, because I don't know the answer to your question in terms of the zoning. But it's very important to keep in mind, the city does not zone to put it back the way you're currently using it. That's not the purpose of planning. It's right inherent in the word planning. It's what the city wants to see potentially in the future, or what it desires to see continued in the future. So I mean no disrespect, but when people say, well, I want it zoned the way I'm using it, well, they're allowed to continue to use it in that way as a pre-existing non-conforming use. And the city, or the future or prior planning commissions, have decided we want to see this be something else in the future, or potentially be something else in the future. Now that opinion can change, and you might think, hey, the way it's being used now is fine.
So,
and that's fine.
Am I hearing you say that if we decline this change, then they could continue to use the property as is?
Right, but they couldn't expand it or remodel it or improve it or add to it.
That's where I was going.
That's obviously where their concern would be.
Okay.
From what I've heard on other projects.
Excuse me, sir.
Ma'am, that's out of order. You
No,
can't,
sorry, no.
ma'am, it's out of order. I'm sorry, you can't speak right now, okay?
I want to challenge what you said to us.
We'll conduct a public hearing in a minute and give you an opportunity to speak.
All right.
But this is just like a court of law. We give everybody an opportunity to speak, but you gotta wait your turn, okay?
Thank you, sir. I understand now. I thought I was not talking.
I think I said everything I intended to say, unless there's more questions.
You answered my question. Thank you.
But to summarize, we could recommend to city council anything from I-1 to R1, because all of those are lesser zone than what's been asked for. Right? The C1 will be a lesser zone than
You can
I-1.
recommend whatever zone in the book you want to recommend.
Perfect. We can recommend to send it to council to approve C1 or R3
Or could we recommend it?
Or you could just deny it.
Yeah, that's
And then appeal it to the they could appeal it to the council, and then they could issue a judgment.
Yeah.
And then it stays.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
I think Commissioner Gould has a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So, which came first, the use or the R1 zoning?
So the R1 zoning didn't exist until roughly 2009. Because we weren't a city, we didn't have a zoning code established until 2009. We became a city in 2007, adopted our zoning code in 2009. The applicant is saying that this Gulf Central facility has pre-existed since city establishment.
Okay, and then how does this jive with the future use plan?
So I kind of touched on that a little bit. You can see on the staff report that it is in our most intense node that we have on our comprehensive plan. It's labeled it as a community destination. It is the most intense node it offers. However, it doesn't address future land use for industrial anywhere in the city. It only talks about mixed use, residential, commercial, retail, items like that. It fails to mention any future industrial anywhere. However, it is in a node. So that's why staff is recommending approval of something more intense than R1, because this is our most intense node that we have.
And the I-1 was necessary because of what they were storing on site?
Well, that's what the applicant requested.
That's what they're saying?
Yeah.
Any other questions for staff? The applicant is present. Would you like to come up to the podium and give us your name, please, and who you represent?
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Judson. I represent the Bella Vista Property Owners Association. Thank you for listening to our hearing on this one. This is different. We've done a lot of rezoning applications. This is the first I-1, which matches the current and historical usage, which predates the city by a long shot. This is consistent with another golf course maintenance facility, which is located for the country club up by the wastewater treatment plant. That is also I-1, which is why we recommend or are requesting I-1 for here. Regarding future selling, it's near impossible for the POA to sell land. And also there is a deed restriction on that land, which requires it to be for recreational purposes only. So in the extreme situation of the POA actually being able to sell land, that deed restriction would follow the land and would require it to be for recreational purposes only. And the golf course is the golf course maintenance facility is a function of recreational usage. So we wouldn't be able to, we wouldn't be able to lease it or sell it and have them do something other than what it's currently being used for. Any questions?
My question is still the same, and maybe it would come from you, Jason. In a situation where the property were leased down the road, would the deed restriction follow it?
We're conflating two things: private restrictions and the public restrictions. It is not uncommon for cities to consider on the front end a bill of assurance that would limit particular uses on property before a city were to rezone it. Okay, so that's already kind of in place because you've got covenants in place which say, and I haven't seen these on this particular property, but it says it's limited to recreation. So I guess that begs the question, how are you able to do what you're doing now that's an industrial use on property that's limited to recreational use by covenant?
Because it's a function of recreation. In order to have a golf course, you have to have a golf course maintenance facility, and so that's by extension, it's recreational
So,
use.
I mean, you can consider that limitation in considering whether or not it should be rezoned. But the issue whether it's owned or leased is not really of merit here. It's use. If they lease it, that's up to their rules whether they can lease it or not. Someone's going to come in and operate on it. It has to comply with our zoning code in whatever manner. But I want to answer your question. I don't want to leave you hanging.
The question I have is, if that property, and I don't know that you would ever do it, but let's suppose that the POA decided that wasn't gonna be golf down there, and they're gonna lease that property. If it's zoned I-1, there are a long list of things
Right.
that could be there
Right.
that wouldn't be, it would not be very nice in that area. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Well, then you need to consider that in determining whether it needs to be rezoned to I-1.
That's exactly right. You answered that before.
But what I'm saying to you is that the fact that the property has a restriction on it, akin to a bill of assurance, but in this case it's a covenant, which works about the same way, that you know that some of those really bad things couldn't happen. So it might make you more likely to approve the I-1 zone in light of that. But that's the best I can tell you, okay? Because
You answered my question.
okay.
Staff just has a clarification note too. The use restriction is provided on page 101 of the packet, and it discusses, I think recreation was mentioned earlier. The use restriction states that it shall be exclusively used for the maintenance of golf courses, turf or parks, and no other use. I just wanted to clarify that.
So obviously your concern is that someone would try to construct a rendering plan on it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you can take into consideration the fact that there are covenant restrictions on the property which would prevent that from happening.
Any other questions for the applicant? All righty. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I had to get my cheat sheet here with all the zones,
Well, you're beating me to it because I was looking for the same thing.
because I stole it. So can you speak to, because I'm looking at the chart and I understand you don't have it in front of you. So maintenance facility and recreation can both be in I-1, but there's other commercial zones that would also allow that use as well. Can you speak to why you chose, why I-1 is more appropriate, why you asked for that instead of any of the other ones?
So, two reasons. I used the guidance of the precedent being set for the other facility. It made sense. And second of all, I contacted our golf course superintendent that runs the location and said, what do we do? Tell me exactly what we do there. And then what I did was I took the zoning language from the city and I started matching up. I looked at C1, C2, and I1, I2. I went through every single one, and to the best of my ability, I1 made the most amount of sense and had the most amount of connections based on how we use the current property. So that's how we did it, but also I followed the precedent.
Because that's what the other facility is.
That's the other facility is I1, and we basically do the exact same thing at that location also, so.
Okay, thank you.
Another large portion during the discussion, early discussion, was the storage of hazardous materials. That was also a big point.
But the storage of hazardous material is secondary.
Is what?
Secondary to the primary function of this facility.
It supports all the other maintenance
So
facilities.
the primary use of the facility isn't storage of hazardous materials. The hazardous materials are part of their normal operations.
We don't really establish primary versus
Well, I know,
secondary.
just
Okay.
for, I'm working through.
Oh, okay. I was like,
We have storage of fertilizer, for fuel, those things, but mostly what we do there is, we call it Golf Central because we bring a lot of our equipment from the other golf courses to this location to do repairs to it and so forth. But we also do support, we do store fertilizer there. As a way of being efficient, we'll bring in large quantities there and then disperse them to the other locations. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, this is a public hearing, so we will go ahead and open this to the public. If there's anybody in the public that would like to address the commission concerning this rezone request, from an R1 to an I1, if you would come to the podium and give us your name and address, and then you will have 5 minutes to speak.
Sorry.
If you come to the podium, please.
Very well.
Yes, ma'am.
And
And
again, my name
give
is
us your name and address again for the
Denise
record.
Rochette, address 29 Dalton. I was just referring to Tom's email that he had sent us, where he stated that it would be used, although he was asking for the zoning of a I-1, he was going to use it specifically for the maintenance of the equipment used on the golf course, and that it would not be changed unless the grantor authorized it. And my question was, who is the grantor that you referred to in your letter?
Well, we can't have it go
Well,
back
I
and
can't go
forth.
back.
You have to
Sorry.
address the planning commission, and then we'll
Sorry.
give the applicant a chance
Back over
to
here.
rebut. Yes, ma'am.
So that was my question.
Okay,
Who is the grantor
okay.
that can change the usage, the intended usage under that I-1 classification into something other than what it is currently being used for?
We'll have the applicant come back up in a minute and address all comments. that are
Okay.
given by the public.
That was my question. And is there any, maybe the applicant can tell me because it's more familiar with the area, is there any plan to modify the buildings, or is it just going to continue pretty much as it is? My lot is adjacent to it, that's why I was questioning. Someone had said they were going to continue to expand the buildings.
I don't know. That's really not a part of what we look at tonight.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to address the commission concerning this request from R1 to I1? Yes, sir. If you would give us your name and address, please.
Good afternoon. My name is David Bales. I live at 37 Dalton Drive, right on top of this thing. I apologize first if I'm rehashing something that y'all have already discussed. I couldn't hear anything. My concern is this facility, if I understand correctly, was established before zoning was there for that? Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay. And I understand the desire to get it correct for the use that it is being, actually being used for. As a guy that lives on top of this thing, my concern is if this is a residential area, that it's zoned residential area, and we have an industrial complex there now, if we rezone it Industrial 1, I'm curious as to what's really going to be there 10 years down the road. So my concern is the fact that we seem to have encroached a little bit on the original design function of that area, and I'm just wondering what are we going to encroach on next? And my concern is just for my and my family's quality of life at the top of the hill. That's my desire. Let you know that I am concerned about that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to address the commission concerning this request? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. We'll give you a chance to come back up to the podium if you'd like to address any of the comments that were made.
We're not planning on making any changes to this facility anytime in the near future. Why it was placed as R1, unfortunately we see several examples within our community where things were zoned oddly. The grantor on the document she was referencing was Cooper. That was it.
I do have one quick question for you. In looking through our complete schedule of uses, the C2 zone would allow for short-term vehicle storage, vehicle maintenance, and things like that as well. If that's something you all would consider concerning where this is located at on 71 versus not being next to the wastewater treatment plant. Because like our attorney did say when we went through training before, technically we're using zoning to kind of think long-term for what we would like the city to be and not so much what the city is or was. And I'm kind of with some of the neighbors there. I don't ever, you know, let's say the POA ceases to exist for whatever reason and the golf course is closed down. I don't see that being a location where we want another concrete plant to be able to go there by right or something like that. But by rezoning this, we're effectively saying anything that's allowed in the I-1 zone, if everything else goes away, can be done. And we know, I know like a C2 zone would get you really close, might not quite cover the chemical storage, but it sure would take care of the vehicle, short-term vehicle storage, and a lot of the things that you aren't doing there, but still be more in keeping with the comp plan. That's just my question.
I'm open-minded. To tell you the truth, a couple of months ago, I had very limited knowledge about zoning and so forth. We're just trying to plan for the future in case we were to someday need to add on to that facility or something of that nature. And clearly, R1 is not even close to being the right zoning. We just want to be in a situation where the usage makes sense, and if we were to request something down the road, and we're not contemplating anything, we're trying to, I've identified, unfortunately, I've identified 28 of the POA's parcels that are zoned incorrectly. So this is not, and clearly we don't have plans for all 28. That would be financially crazy. We're just trying to get it right and get it for the future. So to answer your question, we're open-minded, but to answer the question from earlier, in looking at the usage, it does appear that I-1 makes more sense, but I never wanted to say no. We want to work with the community, we want to work with the city. I understand the concerns. If I was living close by, I'd probably be concerned also. Which is why the reason I wanted to come up here, and I wanted to assure people that we're not going to do anything crazy. We're not going to lease. We're not going to do, put in a concrete plant or anything like. I'm not trying to pick on the concrete people.
Cell phone towers are permitted by right in I-1. That's another one that kind of would be concerning. That could be done.
Yeah, we're not doing this. We're trying to get out of the cell tower business.
Understand. But we have them in several places in these very similar situations right now.
Right. We were actually recently approached by another company, and we told them that we weren't interested because we felt it was going to be too close to homes and so forth. So we nixed it at the onset, and we didn't have to go through the city or anything because we felt it was inappropriate, the location they were looking for.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for the applicant? All right. Thank you, sir. Commissioners?
Daniel, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
So, you mentioned C2.
Mm-hmm.
Would C2 allow them to store the fertilizer and other chemicals like that, or is a conditional use permit available to allow them to do that?
Pre-existing non-conforming use, so they could continue to do what they're doing now at the scale they're doing it.
With the C2 designation?
With any other rezoning, as long as their use has been uninterrupted.
And it's very poetic that we did have our training at our work session, because this is really what the folks came and talked to us about, what our real job is. It's really not about bringing things into conformity, but planning for the future of Bella Vista. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I understand that it's a pre-existing non-conforming use. However, say we were to pick C2 and they needed to renovate the building or add something on, at that point, would that shut down a grandfathered use?
If the enhancement was to facilitate the C2 permitted uses, it would be okay.
Okay.
Right? Wouldn't you interpret it that way?
We have a maximum square footage increase. The use has to be brought in compliance if it's exceeding more than 25% increase.
What I believe what Ms. Lloyd is saying is if they've got chemicals stored over here on this side of the lot, but over here they want to do something with the parking facility or something that they could do in a C2. They were not going to have to move this stuff. If it's C2, they're not going to then have to move this stuff, which is continued in place, in order to make a C2 type improvement. Is that? Okay.
And just remember, we don't rezone it, we just make a recommendation to city council. And we can recommend really anything.
And it's up to council.
From denial to
Right.
I-2, quite honestly.
So I'm kind of share Daniel's opinion. Like, you look at our list of uses, it says ag sales and services is a permitted use. Wouldn't you say that fertilizer is part of ag sales and service? So, why would it be permitted in ag sales and service and not for a golf maintenance facility if they're both in C2? I think it fits.
Convenience stores are allowed in a C2 zone with fuel storage. I mean, like I said, I'm not trying to cram a round peg into a square hole here, but
Well, I can tell you that as you sit as the Board of Adjustment, you all will make the ultimate decision about what type of use fits in which zone. So if it came a question about whether that use was permitted or not, you make the final determination of whether it is or isn't.
yeah, I think what we're being asked to today, what do we see as the highest and best use for that property long-term for the city of Bella Vista and the citizens of Bella Vista?
Well, if the commission wanted to change this to C2, would we then just recommend to the city council that they approve changing it to C2? Or does he have to come back and start over?
No, he does not have to come back and start
Okay.
over again. We have held a
Okay.
public hearing.
Right.
You don't,
Excuse me?
you can just modify it right now. You don't
That's
have to.
what I'm
yeah.
asking.
Yes, that's what I was telling you. And we can recommend, like I said, we can recommend anything the city council we want to. We conducted a public
And
hearing.
they'll do what they want to anyway.
Yes, sir.
Right? You ready for a motion?
If we're done with discussion, you bet.
Well, I would make a motion that we recommend to the city council that they rezone this property C2.
I've got a motion from Farner.
Second.
I got a second from Sedbury. You would call the roll, please.
Sedbury,
Yes.
Lloyd,
Yes.
Dool,
Yes.
Plesson,
Yes.
Farner,
Yes.
Portillo,
Yes.
Ellis.
Yes. City council, it gets you really, I think it gets you there, to be honest with you. That's one person.
Can I say something? No, probably not.
We got, you're our council.
We're done with this item.
We're done with this item. You can always take it up with city council. They're the ones that actually take
No,
action.
we're fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up, we have a request to rezone subject property 1 Houston Road, known as the Metfield Clubhouse, from P1 Conservation to C1 Neighborhood Commercial. Ms. Robertson.
I promise I'll sit down at some point. You guys don't have to look at me anymore. Okay, so this one is known as Metfield Clubhouse. It's at 1 Houston Road. It's currently P1 conservation or for land that can't be developed or or to be restricted to development. It's already been developed. It already has a existing use, as we've already noted, of recreational club, civic, controlled commercial, restaurant commercial, as well as personal improvement commercial. So that is justifying, or that is the applicant's justification of seeking C1. Staff is recommending approval due to the fact that it's sitting within a neighborhood commercial node, and the C1 request meets that intent of our future land use node. It's right smack in the middle of that node, so staff is recommending approval. Nothing new to add to that.
Any questions for staff? Seeing none, applicants present, would you like to add anything to the staff report? All right, this is a public hearing, so we will go ahead and conduct that. If there's anybody in the audience that would like to address the commission concerning the request of changing the Metfield Clubhouse from a P1 to a C1, if you would come up and state your name and address, and we will give you 5 minutes to address the planning commission. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and take it back to the commission.
I make a motion that we recommend to the city council changing this from R1 to C1.
P1 to C1.
P1, I'm sorry.
Second.
Got a motion from Farner and a second from Lloyd. If you call the roll, please.
Dool,
Yep.
Lloyd,
Yes.
Portillo,
Yes.
Farner,
Yes.
Sedbury,
Yes.
Plesson,
Yes.
Ellis.
Yes. All right, next up we have rezoning 2022-47385, a request to rezone the Bowling Springs Park where the Gearhead Brew Pub is at, or whatever it's called, from P1 Conservation to C1 Neighborhood Commercial. Ms. Workman.
Thank you. This is where the Gear Garden is. This is the northernmost parcel of Blowing Springs Park. It also includes 2 transient lodging short-term rental cabins, a large off-street parking lot that makes up 95% of that lot's coverage. There have been no changes to the staff report. Happy to take any questions.
I
Any questions for staff? The applicant, present, anything you'd like to add? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and conduct the public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the commission concerning the request to rezone the northern part of Blowing Springs Park from P1 to C1? Yes, sir, if you would give us your name and address, and you will have 5 minutes.
Hi, Steve Freeman, 2 Hill Lane. Sounds to me like you're just rezoning to accommodate what's already being done there. And there again, there's no plan for anything. You're not presenting a plan, you're a planning commission. You should be presenting a plan on what's gonna be there in the future. So I don't see it as, it's like the golf course usage. If it's already being used and grandfathered in, why are you changing the zoning unless they're gonna do something different in that area? So I'd like to see what's planned for that area as a resident before the planning commission would vote on it. So that's what I have to offer. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to address the commission? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, sir.
It's a long walk.
I didn't see you behind Mr. Tapp.
Matt Porter, 6 Hill Lane, same road, so same argument. We'd love to see, before we just open it up, we'd love to see some sort of understanding of what it's going to be used for. So that's all.
Thanks, sir. Is there anybody else? Ms. Workman, you would come back up to the podium and explain our comp plan.
Sure.
Our plan, please.
So Blowing Springs Park is located within the vicinity of a large-scale commercial activity node as identified in our comp plan. So that is an area in the comp plan that would like to see a regional draw. So that's a mix of retail, that's a mix of residential, commercial, institutional, and Blowing Springs Park is nearing meeting that goal. All of the permitted by right uses within the C1 do meet the intent of the commercial activity center node as defined by the comp plan.
All right, thank you. To clarify for you, yes, sir, to clarify for you guys, when we talk about planning, we're not talking about construction drawings or specific intended uses. We look at large, kind of more over and reaching, is it residential? Is it going to be commercial? We're saying we want it to be a low density neighborhood commercial there. And then once we rezone it to match up with the comp plan that the city council adopted a couple of years ago, then if the applicant wants to come back and add on to the gear garden or wants to add something else that fits within our C1 zone, then he's allowed to do that. But basically, when we talk about planning, it's about, should it be residential, should it be commercial? And council more or less answered that for us already when they conducted the comp plan and they adopted that. Was that 2 years ago or 3 years ago?
Couple of years ago.
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Time
So they kind of did all that planning piece of it a couple of years ago. We're just, what's being asked of us now is this request by the applicant consistent with that plan that was prepared and adopted by council?
We've got a copy of that plan right here. Where that box is there, it is directly next to that commercial area node, and that's going to be Blowing Springs all the way to 71 Business or Bella Vista Way.
All right. Any other comments from commissioners? Now, if we can motion.
I'll make the motion to recommend rezone request 2022-47385 to the city council.
We got a motion from Klesson to recommend rezoning the north part of Blowing Springs Park from P1 to C1. Second. Got a second from Farner. Call roll, please.
Farner,
Yes.
Portillo,
Yes.
Sedbury,
Yes.
Buell,
Yes.
Plesson,
Yes.
Floyd,
Yes.
Ellis.
Yes. All right, next up we have rezone request 2022-47388, a request to rezone the subject property from 31 Hilltop Drive, known as the Metfield Park, from P1 Conservation to C1 Commercial District. Ms. Workman.
Thank you. Again, this is another P1 conservation zone site where the POA is requesting C1 neighborhood commercial. The P1 is designed to restrict development in areas that are challenged by topography, floodplains, wetlands, wildlife. However, this site has been developed quite a bit. It actually exceeds the allowable coverage within the P1. That allowable coverage within the P1 is maxed out at 5%. This site here is covered by 14%. So it meets the C1 coverage, however, it does not meet the P1 coverage. It nearly exceeds it times 3. The adoptive comprehensive land use plan describes a need for a small-scale commercial activity node within this area, and that includes a mix of retail parks, common land uses, and residential. The site currently has residential on 2 sides. It also is fronted by a public park and a minor arterial with greenway access, creating a multimodal connectivity to meet that land use plan. I've made no other changes to this staff report. Happy to take any questions.
We have any questions for the staff on this report? All right, seeing none, the applicant have anything like to add to the staff report? This is a rezoning request and it does require a public hearing. Is there anybody that would like to address the commission on the request to rezone the Medfield Park from P1 to C1? You would come up and give us your name and address, please. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Commissioners?
I make a motion that we recommend to the council to change it from P1 to C1.
Second.
Got a motion from Farner and a second from Lloyd. Call the roll, please.
Lloyd,
Yes.
Sudbury,
Yes.
Dool,
Yes.
Wesson,
Yes.
Farner,
Yes.
Portillo,
Yes.
Ellis.
Yes. That will be at city council also. Next up, we have a zoning variance request on off-street parking spaces for an R1 single family at 4 Gerlach Circle. Mr. Jones, you get to talk tonight.
I know. Hopefully I won't take too long here. So there's not much to add. Can you hear me okay?
No, it doesn't work.
No.
You really need to speak loudly.
I'll probably abandon this.
It does work, you just need to hold it. You're too tall for it.
Okay. Is this all right? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Staff doesn't have much to add to what we covered in the work session. Like you mentioned, this is a zoning variance to reduce the required number of parking spaces for a single-family detached home behind the front building setback from 2 to 1. The applicants can speak more on the hardships, but it's namely the steep topography and shape of the lot. I'll go ahead and catch up here. So the property is wedged in shape, which makes the developable area fronting Gerlach Circle very narrow and pushes the developable area up close to the right-of-way. So the septic system makes for a pretty uniquely shaped house, and this lot is in keeping with the comprehensive plan as a residential district. So staff recommends approval of this zone variance so long as the driveway grade does not exceed a 12% slope and that all water runoff created is kept within the drainage easements. Beyond that though, staff has nothing else to add.
Any questions for staff? If you remind me, this is the one that's kind of a really small footprint, 2-story stack, trying to really minimize the impact on the lot.
Yeah. I think at the end of the exhibits I've included, there should be a house plan there.
Can y'all see this?
No, I'm looking at my iPad, but it can't keep up with the staff report. It keeps resetting, sorry. Oh, okay, yeah. Thank you. All right, is the applicant present? Would you like to add anything to the staff report, sir?
No, sir, if y'all have any more questions.
Any questions for the applicant? All right, this is a variance request. We will go ahead and conduct a public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the commission concerning this request to reduce the number of off-street parking at 4 Gerlach Circle? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Commissioners, it's back to you. This will be a final decision. What we decide is what it is.
Make a motion we approve it subject to staff's comments.
We got a motion from Sedbury,
Second.
second from Portillo. She beat you to it.
That's all right.
You call the roll, please.
Dool,
Yes.
Sudbury,
Yes.
Lloyd,
Yes.
Portillo,
Yes.
Farner,
Yes.
Wesson,
Yes.
Ellis.
Yes, your variance is approved. Staff will get with you on the next step, sir.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Next up, we have a zoning variance request on the maximum number of dockside improvements allowed per parcel at 39 Davis Circle. Ms. Robertson.
Okay, staff doesn't have too much to add to this, however, I have received a public comment, which has been provided in the packet for you guys. Towards the very end, I believe this is the public comments on 144, I believe. They're seeking, the townhouse at 39 Davis is requesting to build a dock on the limited common property that is owned by the Townhouse Association. Regardless of zone or size, our code only allows one dock per parcel, no matter how big it is, what zoning it is, if it's commercial or conservation, whatever it be, it can only have one dock. So this parcel, which is the limited common property, already has 8 to 9 docks on it. So now that 39 Davis is moving in, they want their own dock, so they are seeking a variance on that requirement so they can have a dock like other townhouses do on this limited common property. Other than that, the only thing additional is the public comment, like I mentioned, on page 144. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for staff? All right, is the applicant present?
Yes.
If you would come up to the podium and if you would give us your name, and you can add to the staff report, or you don't have to say anything at all. It's really up to you.
Karen Doyle.
All right. Do you have anything to add to the staff report? Any questions for the applicant? All right, this is it. We'll have to go ahead and conduct a public hearing. If you'd have a seat real quick, we'll get right back to you. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the commission concerning this request for dockside improvements? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Commissioners, back to you. Yes, ma'am.
Is it correct that the work on this has already been started prior to getting permission?
That would be a question for staff.
Staff is unsure of that. That'd be a question for the applicant.
Yes, ma'am.
What happened, we were going through getting everything done. Our stair guy came out and just marked and looked at where he was going to put the stairs because the Townhome Association said yes. And then we found out, no, we got to do more. So then he stopped everything. So all it is stakes and line.
No concrete's been poured?
No concrete, nope.
No concrete's
Nope,
been poured?
nothing. He did put a platform out there for his guys to stand on because it is on a hill. So that's the only thing he did, but that is not part of our stairs and that will be removed. And he hasn't done it yet until we know if it's a go or if it's not a go. So.
Any other questions or comments?
And this is for how many units?
This is just ours.
Just
like
yours?
there's four units in our parcel, and there's one dock that's been there for years and years, and then nobody else in our parcel. And then the next parcel over has one or two, and it just keeps going down the different areas where people have put them in. I guess not all of them are legit. I don't know for sure. So.
It's kind of one of the unique things that's Bella Vista.
I would have thought, just my thing, if you're only going to allow one, you would did like a community one for that group of 4.
Yes.
But who knows?
So I'm sorry, it goes to specifically with your townhome?
Yes, yeah. And we've got approval from both of our neighbors that don't have docks for it. We didn't do it just on our own, and we've even offered to let them use it also, but they don't have any desire to put one in, so.
It's kind of one of those things where 8 other townhomes have already gotten the right to have a dock there and.
Over the years, yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any words of wisdom, Mr. City Attorney?
I've probably said enough. I tend to anger people the more I talk. The criteria for whether to grant a variance don't change.
Sure.
They are what they are. You all are the arbiters of that.
Fair enough.
So let me get this straight again. So anybody else in your unit, that's yours, but we have someone else that would also like their own.
Yes.
Right. next to you.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
I've sold quite a lot of townhouses in this particular development, and I understand why we have the ordinance that says one dock per parcel. This is kind of an unusual situation because you've got a whole bunch of townhouses and a big parcel that goes all the way around the lake frontage that belongs to the Townhouse Association, which is one parcel. But it's a very different situation than I have a lakefront lot and I can put one dock. Because all of the different if we were to, theoretically, anybody who has a lakefront, it's not exactly lakefront because it's separate from the lake because of the townhouse parcel, should they all have the right to put a dock? Or should the person who just bought be denied because other people got there first?
Right.
So it's a very alien situation.
Yes.
I think the unique parcel layout, it potentially could justify a decision. I mean, if you're looking for something.
I was kind of envisioning it, if I were to extend the parcel lines for each unit across the common property to the lake, then it would be. It may be one of those things we need to address in the future in our code to deal with situations like this, because I'm sure we have more variances like this coming. Ms. Robertson is shaking her head. And we have approved variance requests like this before in the past. We have to be careful not to be arbitrary and capricious either. Sorry, I don't want to be an attorney. I'm not practicing law.
But you say something wrong, I'll tell you. You keep going.
I think if we look at the 4 waiver requirements, that several of these apply to this situation.
Technically, it's got to be all of them.
Three variance requirements.
Yeah, 3 variance requirements, and they're very specific. You know, what is the unique nature of the property? What's the hardship? Will it negatively impact or give her
I
a
think
right?
all 4 of them could apply in this situation to this unique parcel of land.
And then just to clarify, this is a variance,
Yeah,
not
it's a
waivers.
variance.
And there's only 3 requirements for variances.
Sorry.
Yes.
Is this a common scenario? Do we have others on different lakes in town that are just like this?
We've had
Or is
others,
this just unique?
especially P1 conservation. It's actually on our open discussion topic as well tonight.
I mean, specifically like the horizontal property regime with the common property, or the,
Yes, this is all over Bella Vista on any lake that can have a motorized boat on it.
Lake Rayburn has a townhouse subdivision, it's the same issue.
It's one of those times when I always say to staff, if we keep seeing the variance requests, it probably means we need to look at our code.
Yep.
So, anyways, with that, I do need a motion or further discussion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Got a motion from Sedbury?
Second.
Got a second from Farner. If you would call the roll, please.
Sedbury,
Yes.
Floyd,
Yes.
Portillo,
Yes.
Dual,
Yes.
Klesson,
Yes.
Farner,
Yes.
Ellis.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're back. Good
Thank
luck.
you all.
You get with staff, they'll help you out with the next steps to
Okay.
keep you in compliance so you don't have to come back.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next up, we have an amendment to the table of permitted uses, a proposed amendment to Appendix A, table of permitted uses of our zoning ordinance, with the intent to make trails a permitted use within all zones. Ms. Robertson.
I don't have anything to add from the work session. I do want to note too, there's a small housekeeping item also proposing. The name of trails in the use definition does not match the use chart. So I'm just proposing to delete for biking and cycling because our definition of the trails use also includes hiking. And so that's a small housekeeping item. And then other than that, staff finds that this is supposed to be a transportation use, and transportation is supposed to get you throughout the city, not just trying to stay within one zone. So staff is proposing just to make it a by right use within all uses. No, nothing further.
Any questions for staff? All right, this is a modification to our schedule of uses, so we will conduct a public hearing. Is there anybody that would like to address the commission concerning this change of adding trails to to all zoning classifications as a by right use? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close our public hearing. Commissioners, it's back to you.
Do we need to add in the housekeeping amendment?
That's already in the staff report,
Okay.
but we just say we want to make the change per the staff recommendations, and that motion would work.
Well, I'll make a motion that we approve this based on the staff recommendation.
This will require an ordinance change, so you're recommending it to
We're
the council.
recommending it to city council.
Move we recommend it to city council.
Second.
You got a motion from Lloyd, a second from Portillo. If you call the roll, please.
Klesson,
Yes.
Lloyd,
Yes.
Portillo,
Yes.
Dool,
Yes.
Varner,
Yeah.
Sudbury,
Yes.
Ellis.
Yes. Build more trails, please.
Yes, please.
All right, last on our agenda for tonight, under new business, we have waiver 2023-1145, a waiver request to have a secondary access driveway on a lot with less than 151 feet of frontage at 40 Hessel Circle. Mr. Jones.
Nothing new to add on this one from our last discussion. Just high-level overview. This is a waiver on the Access Management Code, Section 107.317, which determines the maximum number of access drives per property according to the length of street frontage abutting the lot. 40 Hessel has 80 feet of street frontage. The threshold to have a second driveway is 151 plus feet. And I'll get more into the background here, but the area of this waiver has been a pre-existing gravel section, which I'll show in an exhibit, prior to the city's incorporation. And it's been used by the applicant since that time. It's just been constructed with decorative gravel, which Section 2636 lists as a prohibited parking surface, which is what precludes us as staff from considering it as a legal nonconformity and its usage as well. So the applicant is requesting this waiver in order to bring that subject area into compliance regarding surface requirements. In other words, replace the decorative gravel with an improved surface material type like SB2 or concrete. But he requires that waiver to move forward with work. And I'll go ahead and show a couple of exhibits. Louder?
Yeah.
Really? Still?
We can't hear you guys. It's okay.
No, I think it's the wind. That's the problem. Yeah, it's concerning.
It's not real windy.
It's not, that's got to be significant.
Somebody up there.
No.
I don't think so. It's 6 o'clock at night. I don't think so.
So here's some exhibits in case you want to look at this or your iPad. I just wanted to clarify the plot plan that's been included lists a proposed driveway. That's existing. This is just the plot plan used for construction. The actual proposed area has been highlighted in that red outlined area. And the dimensions are listed there at around 37 feet long and 60 feet. And then I think a couple more exhibits just to show some images. So here's a picture taken by code enforcement showing how it appears from the street with the decorative gravel and how it's been used over time. And then some of the hardships of extending the driveway out to create additional parking just from what's already there. Here, it's limited by steep topography and a retaining wall. And then to the other side, there is a collection of utilities, namely the guy wires and with water. And then I think maybe just a couple more exhibits. One final one. Here's a historical imagery retrieved from Google Earth showing it constructed at the time the house was built. This is January 30th, 2008.
When was it built?
I might leave that to the applicant.
Okay.
Don't know the exact date, but this image here is from January 30th, 2008.
Any other questions for staff? All right, is the applicant present? Would you like to come up and add on to the staff comments?
Most of what you said was correct. Thank you. There is a small correction though. The house was built in 2006. We talked to the home builder just last month, and he said that ACCE and POA went through it, approved everything. We moved in 2007 when it became available. Been there ever since, or so. So I believe it was before the city was, incorporated. The house was, as you mentioned, the house was built with a secondary driveway. I believe this was the decorative rock that was there. Or so one small correction was, we haven't been using it since we moved in like that. We've only had 2 cars, kept them in the garage or so. Recently, a few years ago, our daughter passed away, and we were fortunate to be able to adopt our grandchild. And as he's getting closer to driving age, we purchased a 3rd car just a few months ago. And most of the time, it's in the regular driveway, but we thought, you know what, to be able to get the other 2 cars in and out without having to juggle, moving around, stuff like that, we'd like to use another option or so. And like you said, one option, there's cables on one side and the water line we couldn't use, and this side, it's a little steep to go to the east side, or I'm coming around, I think, yeah, that side, but we could connect it. I mean, we could have, if that would help in the discussion. We're very flexible. We've already reached out to our local landscape companies just to be proactive and asking about SB2 gravel and or concrete or so, just to see what some options are to be compliant. But, and we're also, and you might not be able to see from this picture, but the circle drive, there's also kind of a little blind curve just right up the road here or so. So we think it also would be better if we can keep the vehicles off the street for safety reasons.
Any questions for the applicant?
Yes.
Mr. Farner?
Mr. Chief, approximately how far is it from that secondary driveway to this Trafalgar? Is it Trafalgar?
Yeah.
And that's common property, isn't it?
Yeah, it's common property on all sides. Like across the street, common property from our driveway and the secondary driveway all the way to Trafalgar.
Okay.
100 feet, I'm not sure. But it's a huge gully.
And do I understand that when you bought the property, that secondary driveway was already there?
That's correct.
And it was put there when they built the house?
That's correct.
Okay.
And it was to be used for a secondary driveway?
I believe so. There, on that side of the house, there is some, not only a workshop doors, so probably maybe intention was golf cart access type of thing, but there's also sliding doors into, we use it as a workout room, but another room of the house there on the bottom layer or so. So there is 2 entryways, doors on that side that you can get to from that extra driveway.
So I just want to be clear. You're saying, so if you come around to that side of the house, to the left of the house, there's actually an entry down there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I personally wish it didn't have to be SB2.
I was going to say this.
And we're okay with concrete. That would be the recommendation. We're fine with that too. We just didn't know what options there were, so we're learning a lot this month.
It's the long story of the chicken and the egg in Bella Vista, because we've tried very hard not to allow things that the ACC does not allow. And I think, Taylor, you were telling me this was drafted to match up with the ACC requirements or the code, the covenants and restrictions for the POA.
There's 2 areas of code that are at play with this request that's making it so interesting. So there's 2636, which doesn't allow parking, standing, or stopping of a vehicle on anything other than SB2 or concrete. So that's what's getting him flagged right now. And there's no grandfather clause from that. You can't park on decorative gravel anytime. That's the standard item. So to bring it into compliance, he's wanting to create a secondary access to the city street. Our code would prefer concrete or asphalt. However, because of 2636, it allows parking and stopping to be on SB2. But yeah, after speaking with the ACC, they allow concrete or SB2 so long as it's contained with a border, which is what our code says as well. So I believe so, yes, it was pulled from that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, as Taylor mentioned, this does not count as a pre-existing use.
The parking on the gravel does not count as pre-existing.
Correct.
That's correct.
Now, we have 4 items that were requested to consider for a waiver.
Correct.
This situation does not conform to any of the four. Therefore, I do not believe that we have any grounds on which to approve this variance.
Waiver is not a variance.
Waiver, I'm sorry.
And with waivers, we have a little bit more latitude than we do with variances.
Well, it says we're supposed to consider 4 different things, which, pass this out.
This is also on the second page here. of our
Right,
staff
it was
report.
also in our packet.
Yeah.
None of those 4 conditions apply to this situation. This is a situation, as far as I'm concerned, completely created by the applicant. I don't think we have any grounds to approve this waiver.
Okay. Any other comments?
My only comment would be that that situation of the second driveway was there when he bought the house, it was there when we became a city. So if we're just allowing the owner to put SB2 in there or concrete or whatever so that he can continue using what was already there, it seems that should be appropriate.
My concern is if we do that, we will open the floodgates to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of similar applications, and we will have cars parked willy-nilly in front yards all over the city.
And staff will note too, decorative gravel is not considered an access drive. So that's why we are not recognizing it as a pre-existing driveway. Otherwise, all these landscape yards would be considered multiple accesses to the street.
That was my question, was that it had been covered in decorative gravel rather than the SB2.
That's correct. It's a different gravel than what's in the rest of the landscape,
Uh-huh.
but that's the rock that was used when it was built. Yes.
We always ask for our motions to be in the affirmative. So if we're done discussing it, I will need a motion to approve.
I make a motion we approve waiver 11145.
Got a motion from Farner,
Second.
second from Dool. You call the roll, please.
Portillo,
Yes.
Farner,
Yes.
Lesson,
No.
Dool,
Yes.
Sudbury,
No.
Lloyd,
No.
Ellis,
Are these a simple majority or a 2/3, Jason?
Simple majority.
No. Staff will get with you on what the next steps are, but as far as the gravel is concerned, it can stay there just like you've got it right now.
Can't
Staff-
park it.
Can't park enough though, but staff will get with you on the next steps on that, make sure. Next up, we have an open discussion on the maximum amount of dockside improvements, parking in residential zones, BZA, and zoning variances. Which one's going first, ma'am? We'll start with dockside improvements.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, and staff has been looking into it, because that was the outcome of the last open discussion, is, maybe we should look at it. So staff's been looking at it, Megan's been researching other city codes, Derek did a hefty amount of research before he left, trying to find a comparable city to see what they do they do max percentages of the lake, shorefront, that kind of thing. So Megan has a little bit of information to share with you on what she's found so far and to kind of pick your brain on it.
Right, so in other places like Beaver Lake, Little Rock Lake, et cetera, they base that on a capacity study, and that's the Corps of Engineers. I have reached out to the POA to see if they have done any sort of capacity study to determine whether or not we're vastly approaching the maximum number of dockside improvements for the lakefront properties. I have looked at all of our lakes and I found a number of POA parcels specifically that have upwards of 5 to 6 to 15 dockside improvements for that parcel area. The townhomes are another example of that. We've got 2 areas that have 7 to 10 docks per parcel behind them, and those cross the townhome common property. So we've got the Davis request tonight, and then the next cycle we have another request for dockside improvement within that same P1 on the adjacent townhome parcel for 19 Davis. And so I have not been contacted back by the Corps of Engineers to kind of see how long that capacity study takes, what all it entails. However, that is the way that they are determining dockside improvements.
But these are not core regulated lakes, correct?
Correct. They are not, and the POA did not return my email regarding that. But our lakes right now, 75% of the developed lots have a dockside improvement or more. Some of the older ones, as we discussed prior, some of them have 1 to 2, and when we see those come back, it's when there's a replacement required or they're trying to add an additional dock, so we approach the 2 to 3 dockside improvements, which is why they land in front of the commission, because they are exceeding that dockside improvement. However, the most important parcels to zone in on are the large POA and townhome owned parcels there, which range from 2 to 300 acres that surround the lakes. That includes the marina, the dams, which we saw a few months ago to add the fishing dock for public school use. We have no formal recommendation on which way you'd like to go on it, but there are a number of parcels that are heavily developed and exceeding that 1 per parcel.
I wonder, I understand the individual lots, but I wonder if our code should read on common properties, if it's approved by the POA, then it's approved by the city, and just let the POA manage their own common properties.
Well, if you're,
They
I think
own
you're
the
looking at
lakes.
me, I don't know if you're looking
I'm
at
looking right at you, sir.
Okay, well, a couple of thoughts came to mind. Of the cities that regulate that, are those public lakes? I bet they are public lakes.
I bet they are.
These are private lakes.
Yes.
Private uses on private lakes. And that is a serious distinction that could give the city reason to say, y'all figure that out. We're not going to take a stand on that particular thing. But you could say that about a lot of stuff in Bella Vista.
I mean, there's some things that, like we talked about in our training session about the public health, safety, and welfare.
Mm-hmm.
Is another dock on a townhome association property really going to affect the public health, safety, and welfare? We don't get our drinking water from the lakes.
You know, one thing that the government should not do is sit around and guess about it.
Yep.
If we're concerned about it, study it. Have a study done. Get somebody to tell you what the risks are of docks or not. Maybe having more docks is safer because you got more things to grab onto if you're a swimmer. I don't know.
That's a fair
You know,
question.
who has any
concerned
idea?
about it? I think staff is asking that question, are we concerned about it?
Or do you still think it needs to change? Do you think that the zoning, if it's P1, needs to be allowed more docks? Do you think that it should be done by width, percentage of the lakefront? Like, is the 1 per parcel fair? Is the intent of this for only the R1 lots that are actually lake access, or is this also intended for lots that completely surround the lake? Is what staffs want your opinion on? Do you think the intent of this dockside improvement requirement was intended for these huge P1 parcels? that have multiple docks already? Or was it only intended for the R1 lot that only has 100 feet of lakefront? That's the big question we're asking.
I suppose when she builds hers, you're gonna get more requests.
We've already got another one submitted, it's coming up.
The same complex is probably gonna want 2 or 3.
What do you
You're gonna
want,
tell one yes.
what does staff want to do? Do you want to keep trying to regulate this stuff in the P1 zones? Or you want to let the ACC and the POA manage their own property and their own lakes?
POA probably should have some say in how many docks go on each lake.
I mean, they have to get it approved by the ACC, right? And the POA to put it there?
They achieve a permit from the ACC, as well as meeting POA requirements, but I believe the actual only permits are from the city and the ACC.
Sure, but I mean, we can rewrite our code if the council so chooses to say we're not going to really concern ourselves with the P1 properties and just do the R1 single family properties. That, if I heard you correctly.
Are you saying not require a permit for if it's on a P1 zone?
No, I'm saying that we can grant the permit once the POA approves the dock on a P1 property.
Does the POA have inspectors for building and safety?
I'm not saying, no, I'm still saying we would issue a building permit. We just can't, we wouldn't issue a building permit until the ACC approves the dock location, size, design, and all that.
And we would have every right to require a building permit and inspect these things and all that stuff.
I just
We're just
don't-
talking about numbers,
I was
basically.
talking about them variances on P1 properties, and like the one we had tonight, I was sitting there struggling when 8 other people get to have their own dock within the townhome association, and for us to decide that number 9 or number 10 or number 12 doesn't get one.
Well, is there a way to make the code specific to the P1 properties as opposed to an individual lake lot?
Well, staff could bring you a proposal for that if that's what you guys are interested in.
But how do docks on P1 not affect the city as much as a dock on an R1, or vice versa? What is the public, what's the rational basis for a distinction?
I don't know if there is.
That's what we've been looking for. How do other cities or governing bodies or other agencies determine that max?
Well, this is a private, that's the thing I go back to, this is a private lake owned by the POA. And it's different than a driveway access. The city of Bella Vista owns the roads now. We took those over. We did not take the lakes. We did not take the golf courses over.
Is this something that the staff could meet with the POA and see if they have any?
They're not gonna, I mean, I don't know how else to say this, but they have no incentive to cooperate with us on this issue.
You said it very well.
They're gonna do what they wanna do, and whatever we wanna do is what we wanna do, and this, we're all gonna get together and do, it just isn't, we've got so many, and I know the nature of this city, given the fact that it's privately planned and basically privately owned in terms of all the infrastructure, including the utilities, makes it incredibly difficult for a municipal government in that to exercise the control most cities would exercise. And this is just one element.
What would you recommend in this case?
I'd say, well, again, I'm not here to express opinions. Don't try to regulate the number of docks. Make sure they're safe docks, make sure they're constructed correctly, make sure there's not electrical problems. I mean, we've seen all kinds of issues regarding safety in these things. But, you know, these people are buying these houses and the market will address, you know, there's just dock, you know. But then again, there are marinas where it's just dock, you know, one after another. And it's not our lake. If it was our lake, and I'm not advocating it ever be our lake, any of these, because of all the issues that come with that. You know, it's up to the POA to make a decision. They own the lake. They really have an interest.
That's the question I was asking. Are we trying to regulate something, add requirements beyond what the private property owner of that lake has just because we feel like we want to, or we, like Jason says, we focus on the public health, safety, and welfare, and make sure the dock is constructed correctly, and get out of the business of hearing variance requests every month on docks.
Well, we don't have our police department patrolling the lake to make sure everybody has their activity card.
Nope, that's what
We
we
don't issue
do.
permits for boats for the lakes. I don't feel like we should be doing it. Aside from the building permit.
Well,
We're all pointing toward you.
I would like to see us keep control of the individual lots.
I'm
About the number of docks and.
I'm hearing our attorney, I think we need to be in the business of regulating them or not. One or the other, not try to do some kind of a hybrid approach that still makes it complicated for staff. And like I said,
No, I didn't think about that.
I'll give you a good example. RDOT owns a highway that runs right through the middle of the city. That's their highway. They grant the driveway permits onto that highway. The city can have some say on it, but technically that highway is sovereign. Even if we grant a driveway permit, RDOT does not have to grant that. This is a lot of the same way. We could grant a second dock, but if the POA says no, then our granting means nothing. And so I want to make sure that we're not taking away something that by being, when you purchase your property within Bella Vista, you have the right to do, or other people have the right to do before we were even a city. And the POA's done a good, they have managed those lakes since the 60s. Does the city need to step in now, 60 years later, and start helping them with that? Or do we just let them manage their lakes?
Well, with health education, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, sorry, the sun is
You
not.
got the worst seat in the house.
Yeah, I did. I think they got the worst,
It's a newbie.
those blinds aren't gonna work. I think if we were to remove the ordinance that specifies there can only be one dock side improvement per parcel, that doesn't mean that we don't have to give them a building permit. It just throws it back to the ACC. And if the ACC wants to grant it, they still have to come to us for a building permit. So I think that might solve what you're suggesting.
That's what I'm saying is, once the ACC and the POA signs off on it, then the city can issue the building permit on the dock and do the inspections, and away we go. And then we get out of the
They
business.
would have every right to require certain safety, special construction on docks even, whatever that might entail. We might want to see certain safety features on a dock. We want to make, I can't even presuppose what all that would include, but we would have every right to.
That's what we have qualified building inspectors for.
So just to clarify, which I was going to bring that up too, it sounds like it may just be a removal of the number restricted and just allow us to still enforce the side setback and the size limitation and materials used, and of course other safety requirements is what would be left after that.
Yeah, basically, say, once the ACC and the POA approve, you can issue a building permit.
Because then you'd still have a lot of people coming, wanting to build into the,
Yeah, just enforce our setbacks.
yes. I
Fair
don't
enough.
want to hear those.
In other words, get out of the dock business,
Yes.
other than
Yes.
building permits.
Yes.
That's what they're saying.
Other than building.
Well, we-
Yeah, health
I mean,
and
that's what
safety.
some of them, most of them are saying.
Yeah, we'll do the health and safety part of it, but not the,
So we'll be doing still size limitations, materials, and side setbacks. That's all we'd be, that's basically still the requirements we'd be enforcing.
Size limitations has to be.
it's still in there.
Yep,
You don't want a 50-foot dock.
yeah. Okay, staff
That
will.
will take care of 75% of our variances for dock stuff.
Well, that's the number one dock, ZVR that we get. Sometimes or previously in the past, we'd get some on like length because they'd want like a 22-foot or 30-foot dock. Our code maxes out at 18 feet. But yeah, the number restricted is.
Why is it maxed out at 18 feet?
I don't know.
Many boats that are 18 feet long.
Yeah, and 22 feet long. Not sure why. I wasn't here when it was
My
written.
fishing boat was 20 feet long, it was just a little fishing boat.
Yeah, I feel like we're gonna, if that's the only remaining variance, we're gonna see those for length. So
Yeah, length would be
I
the-
wouldn't be opposed to increasing that length,
Yeah, I wouldn't either, to be honest with you.
something larger.
Well, sometimes in the code, it's a problem.
Yeah,
it goes all the way across the code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying to give an unlimited length, but 18, like Daniel says, is a little too short.
We're in our codes.
That calculates the distance, either 18 max or
15% of the shoreline distance.
Okay, fair enough, works.
So leave that, we're just coming back with limit restrictions now.
Yep.
Okay.
Of course, that'll just go with the recommendation of the city council,
Yeah.
so.
We'll have to hold a public hearing on it.
What's the next one?
Parking in the residential zone.
This kind of goes back to the waiver request we saw today. Staff again is just wanting to discuss or just get your guys' opinion on the SB2 parking areas. I think Commissioner Lloyd had an item on it based off the email that I received. I said I'd be happy to bring it up in open discussion if you wanted to talk about it further.
I handed that out to everybody and I said basically what I said on that.
Okay.
I could add something to this because I've been around here long enough. But when we first started the city, there was a real push by the mayor at the time and members of the council, I think, to establish a few rules which mirrored ACC requirements. And the point of that was particularly something like parking. It was very difficult. Again, I'm not trying to put words in anybody's mouth or what their official position is, but it was difficult for the ACC to control people parking because that's just, their remedy is to take away membership privileges or to sue someone or to take actions which didn't work. And so when we became a city, they thought, great, we'll get city streets and we'll get some parking enforcement and some things. And so they adopted this requirement to mimic or mirror ACC requirements. And one of those things was that they would allow people to park in the yard as long as it had SB2 gravel on it. And they did not want people parking on the decorative gravel. So the city adopted an ordinance that like I said, mirrored that. So what that creates is that, and we've had this in other contexts, people want to change the city rule because they want to do something. And what they don't understand, and I mean no disrespect to any of them, it's confusing, is that they're just going to allow the ACC to sue. We did this with chickens. We had people come to the city wanting us to allow hobby chickens in houses. And they had I wasn't here at this time, but they had a significant debate about it. And they adopted an ordinance that would allow a certain number of hobby chickens in residences. And as soon as they started doing it, the ACC started sending letters and they filed lawsuits to stop it because it violated the covenants. And so people thought they were going to be allowed to do something or not do something based if they could convince the city of something. And it is part of the multi-layered private and public rules and enforcement that we have here. And so if we didn't have this rule and we didn't care about where people parked, the ACC would care where they parked if they were in the 90+% of Bella Vista that are a part of the Bella Vista POA, and they're going to start taking legal action against them. They're still not going to be able to do it.
Right.
And so we've got, and it is so hard to get people to understand that, and they get so mad. I'm just be honest with you. The staff, they get it more than I do, but it's just the frustration and anger about some of that. And you just can't explain it, and it is kind of a difficult legal thing to understand. I'm not, these are intelligent people, they get it, but it's just the nature of what we've got here, and I don't know how to fix that.
And I'll be honest with you, I think every other city in northwest Arkansas is very restrictive on what they allow for driveways and parking. I mean, they're very restrictive. We're probably the most liberal already as a city by a pretty long shot. And I have struggled with that one a lot because we talk about it in all these different parameters and stuff like that, but there should only be so many cars at a house. Right. Because technically, we talked about the septic systems before, there's only so many people supposed to be living in that house based on that septic
That
system.
would help with the short-term rentals too.
Well, we're not going there. That's not on the conversation tonight. But I mean, I even got the nasty letter one time because my son was parking in the grass. So I get it, it was fair, he was wrong, he wasn't supposed to be doing that, and he moved his car. So, I don't know. I think our ordinance is good. I wish we didn't allow SB2. I wish it had to be concrete. Just plain up had to be concrete. I don't even like asphalt, to be honest with you. Wish it had to be concrete, and I wish it was restricted to one curb cut for 150 feet of frontage. And if you get over 150 feet, or whatever it is, then you can have two. But, I mean, I remember when the commission formed and we wrote that one, that was one we did right ourselves, was on driveways and
We
off-street
did.
parking. We
We
labored
did.
under that. And the council adopted it. But that's me. I'm only one. But somebody else please speak up, please.
So the ACC only allows SB2 as,
Or concrete.
or concrete? I think we're missing out on some other opportunities, like with paving stones.
So our code allows concrete pavers,
Yeah.
paving stones. I'd have to verify with them.
Well, let me rephrase it. I think the ACC is missing
Okay,
other opportunities.
I don't know off the top of my head if they allow it.
SB2 is the bottom of my list for paving of anything.
Let me ask you a question. Why is this in for open discussion? Are you wanting to change something?
No.
I just wanted your guys' opinion because it's been discussed on multiple levels, and so staff, we are your staff of the planning commission, so just wanted your.
We have told staff that we keep seeing the same thing, do we need to revisit?
Yeah, I
the
just
code?
wonder if we were trying to recommend something here, but they're not. So,
I know the ACC, we don't talk a lot. I am agreeing with Commissioner Sedbury. This is one I think I would like staff to maybe go back to the ACC and say, as a group, you know, can we revisit what we build driveways out of and maybe get rid of SB2 and allow other types that are what we would consider low impact driveways now? So there's a lot of acceptable things out there that's not SB2.
I had this conversation in other cities, and in those other cities, if I wanted to pave my driveway with gold nuggets, it wouldn't be allowed. Right?
Yes.
So it didn't make any difference what the other material was, whether it was superior or not. It just flat out was not allowed. And I don't know if that was just, you know, as a product of being unfamiliar with the construction techniques, or just trying to simplify it to the point where they didn't have to worry about it.
They came up with it in the 60s, and all they had was concrete, asphalt, and SB2. So
Yeah.
that's all they had.
I mean, there are a lot of alternatives that are impervious.
Right.
Yes.
That would be, and I think with the topography and water runoff issues that we have, recommending some other up-to-date impervious surfaces would be appropriate.
I'll just add that as the city continues to click along at 500 to 600 building permits per year, even though there's 39,000 lots, about half of those are either built on and the owner owns the one next door and probably never have a house on it because it's got a septic or just, you know, they're using it for other purposes. So what we're seeing, whether it's parking challenges because of pie-shaped lots, short depth lots with steep topography, or drainage, or people buying a lot 2 doors up because they thought they could park on it. We're seeing more and more challenges over these remaining less desirable lots, unbuildable lots, than what the city saw in its first 30 or 40 years, in my opinion. So moving forward, these remaining 10,000 or so lots that can be built on, we're gonna have more and more challenges.
So are you recommending that we adjust our code to maybe one off-street parking stall, or, you know, it's because like the one we looked at, I mean, I give the applicant credit, I mean,
Our code prohibits that, but when you drive around every lake, you see a ton of those. And people want to be able to add those like their neighbors have. And those are a challenge for us because we get a lot of requests, but, I mean, they affect drainage, you know.
one little pie-shaped lot where he's putting a 700 square foot house on there and making it 2 stories, and barely getting a one-car garage and a little bitty driveway on
Yeah,
there.
he's talking about a parking stall not in the right of way,
Yeah.
within the setbacks. So are you saying making an allowance for those smaller lots of street frontage to only have one
I
parking?
mean, if there's some logical stuff there that we ought to reconsider then to try to cut down on the workload, should we?
Well, the problem with the street issue, if we're gonna talk about that, is the streets are too narrow. We can't get fire trucks through there. The fire chief is gonna,
You can barely get your own car
and
now.
we prohibit overnight parking on the streets as a
Yes.
general matter.
Yeah.
It's a big, I don't know, it's one of those things that, this might be one of those things where we need to hire some consultants to study it and come back with some recommendations that are specific to Bella Vista. And, you know, like we had the applicant tonight that said he didn't want to jockey cars around. I understand, but that happens in every city in northwest Arkansas. When their teams start driving, they got to jockey cars around unless they got a 3-car garage.
We had one in the office today that was consulting with our plan reviewer, and I could overhear the conversation. He's trying to get ready to start this design on this house, and he knows going in that he's gonna be jockeying cars. But he's still gonna do it. And then, you know, there's a chance that it could end up being a problem down the road. So he's doing it knowing there's gonna be trouble.
Sure, I mean, and it comes back to what Jason has said before. Just because I want does not mean that we grant it. And we do struggle with that a lot of the I wants instead of looking at this is what our ordinances say, come up with something that fits our ordinances. We saw that a few months ago on the guy that was, I mean, he actually took the time to design a house that fit the topography and fit the lot. And he had a couple of minor things, but it was obvious that he didn't just pull a house plan out off a website and plop it down and said, I want this.
Okay, well, that's really helpful.
Was it? Didn't tell you anything.
I think as much of a discussion as it is here, it will be at the council.
Oh, I know, you are getting ready, the council's getting ready.
And, well, it just, it's just impossible to coalesce around what to do. It's just because everything is different and
It's not a cookie cutter.
it's not, we don't have regular size street width, we don't have, you know,
Regular
because
size
there was no
driveway.
city that was in charge of deciding how those houses were gonna get built and laid out when they were laid out. And
If you really want to get in, we can talk about storage.
Nope,
Not today.
that's for the council, they're gonna get to deal with that one, I guess. According to the social media, they're gonna get to deal with that one. All right, last up, we have BZA and zoning variances. I know that's coming out of our work session. Whatever, I was emailed on that, and I told staff, whatever our city attorney recommends, that's what we should do.
you need to ask me, because I don't know what came up, I'm sorry.
Should we do all of our BZA business in a block and then move on to waivers and large scale at the second phase? We had training with regional planning, and they said we ought to technically wear 2 different hats. The zoning variance always comes before the large scale approval.
Well, I
There
think
is
you.
one city that doesn't do that, Springdale specifically, they take them by the project.
Obviously, you would not have the authority to approve a large scale that presupposed the approval of a variance you had not decided. So it's always going to be my advice to you that you consider any variances prior to any development plan based on those variances.
Sure.
Because you know there are certain requirements you have to meet in order to prove a variance. And so you need to establish that, then you can look at your development based on that. You run the risk of conflating all of the some impermissible considerations in your variance, or adding requirements onto a large scale that may not be appropriate. So, but in terms of, I mean, you sit as the Board of Zoning Adjustment. I don't, with respect to whoever was talking, you don't need to split it up and say, okay, take this hat off and then have all this business together and all that business together. as long as we're doing it the right way and you're considering it the way you need to consider
As
it,
long as we're following the guidelines spelled out in the ordinance.
Right.
In our ordinances,
Right.
how to consider.
and when you
variance.
consider a variance, you're sitting as the Board of Adjustment and you're using different consideration criteria, and it's up to the various applicants to come and determine the appropriate way to appeal those various decisions. If it's a variance, they have to go to court directly. If it's a large scale, they don't like the result of, they go to the city council.
If it's a waiver, it goes.
Or if it's a waiver, it could potentially go to the city council. So I was asked when we did this whole combining thing, I was asked that very question. And this is how we came up with doing it.
I like the way we do it because
Yes.
we consider everything for that project at that time. We stay, and it's not jumping back and forth. One thing I think I do like, and I do appreciate Commissioner Lloyd printing these out for us. The technology's great. I kind of like it, but I really don't like it at all, to be quite honest with you. I wouldn't mind you all having something to hand out to us just to remind us of what our criteria are for waivers and variances as we're considering them. Don't need all of them. And then the other thing would be like the full schedule of uses. Because I was sitting here trying to go back and forth and trying to look at the schedule of uses for all of them when we were looking at the I-1 zone. And I know we're trying to be green friendly. I don't care if you print them out and laminate them, so you can hand them out every month to us and then collect them back up. But I would not mind having a few specific reference materials available that's not on the iPad.
So we're still working on that packet for you guys, so we can include that. Would you guys just prefer us bring those, like, to every meeting, so you can just have them with the iPad?
If you want to just have a little 3-ring binder that's got a few cheat sheets in it that deals with, these are the 3 criteria for a variance, these are the 4 criteria for a waiver. Here's our standard schedule of uses table. Man, that would be huge to be able to just flip to that real quick and reference it versus.
Okay.
I love this thing, but it crashed on me 6 times tonight, so I was completely lost. And I understand it's because of what we got in there. I'm hoping once everything gets set up, these are not needed anymore, but time will tell.
Yeah, the plan was for each of you to have a screen. I don't know, I assume that's still the plan.
I think it's only 3 computers.
Is it only 3?
It's all 3.
Because I'm sitting here thinking if they did that, no one would ever be able to see you because.
I'm assuming we're gonna have some really big monitors hanging up there.
Well, they're going to be here and here, I think, against those side walls. You see those connections?
Oh, those might be from the audience.
I'm not sure what those are.
We will labor through until we figure out what we're gonna do in here, but the cheat sheets, even if we go to the TVs or whatever, it would be like.
Good idea.
But I was really wanting to be able to really go, and it was hard to do on the iPads out in the schedule.
Those iPads are getting old, aren't they?
They're ancient, yes.
Yeah, so they probably don't have that. They're just glitchy because there's too much trying to do too
I
fast.
saw Clay was doing the same thing, going down through all the C2 versus I1. I was like, And then, of course, it crashed on me twice while I was doing it, so I was really struggling. So, all right. Is that everything for open discussion tonight? It must be a basketball game or something you're wanting to watch. Oh, yeah, I'm hungry too. All right, city council work session will be on Monday, March 20th at 5:30 p.m. The regular meeting will be on March 27th at 6:30 p.m. We will have a work session on March 30th at 4:30 p.m. Commissioner Farner will be leading that work session. I will be in LA.
Okay.
Then we'll have a planning commission regular meeting on Monday, April the 10th at 4:30 p.m. And with that, we stand adjourned. I've been dying to do that all night long. Wanted to be the first one to bang the gavel.
You should have done it when.
No, that would have been me.
Oh,
she didn't understand the process. We got her cleared up. It was okay.
We got to figure out whether somebody's walking on this.